Hey, 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 welcome to Faith, Grit and Grace, the place where we say what we know you're thinking. Today we are talking about Miss Derrick Jaxn and that Dear Future Wifey podcast interview that she did. If some of you have heard it, you know exactly what we're talking about. And also the Guardian newspaper speaks about the rapid decline in Christianity across the UK, except for in the Caribbean and African churches. So we'll ask why that may be. And finally, there is a video of a beautiful, happily married couple walking down the aisle after saying their vows, but the groom appears to be he had his mind elsewhere, unfortunately. So we're going to talk about that as well on Faith, Grit and Grace.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello and welcome to the Faith, Grit and Grace podcast. We have a name this week, so if you tuned in last week, you'll remember we weren't quite sure what we were going to name ourselves, but we have a name now. This is Andrina, and introducing my co-host. Introduce yourself, co-host.
Hey guys, I'm Tasha.
Hi Tasha. Right then, well, thank you so much for joining us again. We've got some really great topics to be talking about today, and we're going to jump right in with the Derrick Jaxn podcast. So she went on the Dear Future Wifey podcast and gave an interview. It was quite a long interview, wasn't it, Tasha? It was a
very long.
Yes. So if you got time, if you were driving or whatever, you put on the podcast and took a listen. But she shared quite a lot of interesting information. So for those of you that don't know, Derrick Jaxn is married. She is still married to Derrick Jaxn, who was a relationship guru. He had books out. He did loads and loads of podcasts and videos about how men should treat women. And I think some of the men actually didn't like him very much, did they? Because
ruined their relationship.
Absolutely, because he was basically empowering women, which is a good thing, but it was to the detriment of men. And a lot of men actually called him out for some of his shocking behaviours, because it actually turns out that behind the scenes he was married, which a lot of people didn't know about. And also he had a long history of cheating on his partner. So even though he was out there telling men how to behave in relationships and telling women what they should and shouldn't put up with, he was actually doing the absolute opposite. So there was a big fallout. Then there was that notorious bonnet video where he came on and I think he was trying to salvage his business and his relationship. So he came on with Derrick and she had her bonnet, which she referred to as her helmet of salvation. Thank you, Jesus. And there was lots of memes going around at the time, but basically Derrick has gone through a process of healing. She's gone through a process of finding herself, finding God, getting herself in the right place, and now she feels able to talk about what she was going through. It was her truth, absolutely her truth from start to finish. And there was some very interesting nuggets that she left with us. So Tasha, what did you think? Like, what were your views on the podcast?
I don't even know where to start, girl. I don't know where to start, honestly, because I saw the podcast and I was like, Derrick Jaxn. I was like, who's that? Because I love to watch Dear Future Wifey. I watch it or I listen to it, whichever. And then I saw something on Insta and I was like, wait, hold up, what? So I went back and I saw 2 parts. I was like, 2 parts?
Yeah, it was long.
So now I'm invested. Now this is taking up the rest of my day. I have my Google Pods in my AM in little shopping. And I'm like, girl. Whew, child. It was a lot. I don't even know where to start.
It was a lot. Well, let's talk about, and this might be something that single women are doing now. Let's talk about before they even got married. So they got together very young, didn't they? They were 19. And before they even got married, he was cheating on her, and she knew he was cheating. They were together, they weren't together, they were together, they weren't together. And she did describe herself as being, the quiet one. She was a little bit chubby. So when she got Derrick Jaxn, and I will say Derrick Jaxn is all right on the eye. Yes,
ma'am.
So when she got Derrick Jaxn, or when he showed an interest in her, she was like, okay. So they were together, but it was on and off and on and off. And then she said at one point, because she even had said you had to define what commitment was, because the commitment was very fleeting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So at one point she said that they weren't actually in a relationship, but they were still sleeping together.
Yeah.
And so she was going around and doing their thing, but she said that there was kind of like a timetable of women where they were all just like, she would go at one time, she'd come out, sometimes she'd pass the next woman going up on the stairs.
That's wild.
And what do you think that says about a woman who knows that she's sleeping with a man who has a number of other women on the go?
I think sometimes, especially when you're young, you don't understand your value.
Absolutely.
You don't understand your worth. I think as you go through time, you realize, hey, I'm worth more than this. And you start looking at things not just from one side of the coin, but you're like, this is not worth my mental state. It's not worth my spirituality. It's not worth my health, because now you're opening yourselves up to diseases and stuff like that, because I am sure that he's not protecting himself with all these various women. So
I mean,
listen,
she did. And just to note, she wasn't a Christian at the time. She is a Christian now. She got saved during the course of the marriage, but she wasn't a Christian at the time. But she actually said that she got pregnant during this time of her with him with all these other women. So for me, my first thing was, you are having unprotected sex with a man who is having unprotected sex with
other people.
How many other females? And she said at that point she didn't want to get an abortion, and this was the other thing that blew my head, because she'd already had 3 abortions. So this was her fourth pregnancy for this man.
I think that growing up back then, because Danae's like in our age range, so to speak, she's in her 30s just like we are. So growing up back then, a lot of weight was put on you having a child outside of marriage. And I clearly couldn't understand that, because I had my daughter when I was 19. Wow. Now, why didn't I get married then? I had the dress, okay? I had the dress, but then I came to the realization, you ain't gonna change.
Wow.
And the paper is not gonna change you. And I remember my partner at the time saying, oh, but look what my mother went through, and look at what your mother went through. I was like, I'm not my mother.
We break the generational cycle right
you gotta
here.
end somewhere. So sometimes you still fall into relationships and you stay there longer than you should, but I think there is a power in finally learning when you lock into your scriptures and you realize, hey, God says I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Why am I accepting trash behavior? I'm not trash. So finally, I mean, I love the new Danae. It took some...
I mean, because she went on to, as we know, she went on to marry Derrick.
Unfortunately.
So, I think she was going to leave, and we don't want to spoil too much of the podcast, because we do suggest you listen to it, because there's lots in it that we can't cover.
No.
But she goes on to marry him. And I think something else that I noted from that I thought that's really interesting was, she was like, when he proposed, she was like, finally, see, look at all those other women now, look at where I am. I got him, and you can say what you want, but I was the one that ended up with him. And I think sometimes single people, when they finally get the ring that they've been waiting for, there can be a little bit of a, oh, look at me now, and you guys are still single and I'm married. And I think we have to be really, really careful, because we don't know what our marriage may hold or contain. And sometimes, there's people out there putting out a brave face on how great things are, and inside of the marriage, it's not something that you'd want.
But what are you marrying into?
Well, that's the question.
That's the thing, because he didn't change, he didn't stop.
No.
And she had the proof that he didn't stop. So why still marry him? Just blew my mind.
But don't you give people permission for how they treat you? So he was doing that. She knew he was doing it. He asked her to marry him. She said yes.
She said to some extent he did not know He did not know that she knew some of the things that.
That's true. She did say, yeah.
But she knew. I mean, you passing this woman on the stairs.
Absolutely.
First of all, I don't know how wigs weren't flying, and earrings weren't being snatched.
It seemed like it was just an understanding. It's like, okay, we're all just sharing this one man.
I'm number 4. I'm okay with that. With my time at 7 p.m. on a Friday.
So yeah, but you're right. She continued to marry him, and oftentimes we do marry people hoping that they change or thinking that they'll change or thinking, once I've got them now, I can hold them down. And she went through so much pain through that.
And he still didn't change.
Absolutely, because she even said she saw videos of him having sex with other women on his phone, and she was trying to do the things that these women were doing to try and make her husband want her, and it just didn't work. And then there was the condo, Tasha. There was the condo,
girl.
So they had a big mansion, she said, because he was doing well. He's a public figure. Yeah. He had money. He was doing well. And then he also had a condo. And even the host said, why did you need a condo? You've got a mansion. Exactly. Why can't you find somewhere? Because he wanted to use this condo for work, apparently. So he was like, why couldn't he work in the mansion, build something at the bottom of the garden?
And there was so many excuses.
Yes, but he couldn't
wasn't buying it.
Do it there. So he had to go in. And then she said most of the time he was living at the condo, living the life of Riley with all these women, and she was there with the children at home. And she said sometimes she would go to the condo to try and be intimate with her husband and stuff. And she said he was like, oh, let's just talk. And she's like, I know you're going to talk because he's already
tired now.
Come on, he's done what he needed to do.
Listen.
But it is a redemptive story, and I think we know that she's come so far. She's healed a lot, and still gonna take a lot of absolutely
healing,
and you can tell that there are still some areas that God is still working in her on, but that is okay, because we're all works in progress. And my advice to anybody in those types of situations is, don't believe marriage is going to change somebody. No. Don't believe it at all, and know your worth. Know your worth.
But I just have a question about the healing, though, because she's on this healing journey. I know that sometimes you think, okay, I've dealt with this and I'm good and I'm moving on, but sometimes I think that this healing thing, like, is there really a time frame on it? Because I think she has like some sort of package or whatever you can buy into.
A program.
Is it like a few weeks, 8 weeks, 8 months? I can't remember quite what it is.
8 months, I think she said.
But how do you heal from something that has happened to you? It has so many different things. It's over a decade of stuff. And are you saying that you're healed in just like 8 weeks or 8 months, or...
It is a difficult one, isn't it?
I don't know.
And I suppose it's only really God that can determine when somebody is truly fully healed, because you do see times when pastors or leaders in the public eye will fall from grace very publicly, and they might be like, okay, I'm going to step down, and then like a week later they're back up doing like everything that they were doing before, because they've healed in that week. So it is difficult to say that it takes a certain amount of time, but I do think with the amount of trauma that she went through in that whole time she was with Mr. Jaxn, there was a lot, and she'd experienced some trauma before she got married to him as well, so she was just dealing with a lot, and I think it just manifested in she recognized that some of her behaviors were toxic throughout it as well, and I think that's important for all of us to see. It's so easy to see everybody else and what they're doing and what he's done and what, but sometimes we have to really turn the mirror back on ourselves and say, actually, when I behaved in that way, that wasn't appropriate. She knew about a lot of this stuff, as you said, without him knowing, and he said he'd find her crying, and because she knew, and he was like, what's wrong, and she would just lie and say it was something else. But I think we have a responsibility. If there is something that is bothering us, if there's something that is hurting us, we have to speak about it.
It makes you wonder, why didn't she feel safe in her marriage to communicate that you're hurting me? You're hurting me. Why didn't she feel safe to this man who's making all these millions of other women feel safe? Why didn't you feel safe enough in your marriage to say to your husband, look, I know that you're doing this, and you either gotta change or you gotta let me go.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm thinking about in so many different things, even with the condo. I would have taken up those kids. We'd be sitting right
We'd
there
all
in
be
that
living in the
condo with
condo.
you.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Do you think it's something to do with her trying to submit to this husband?
She said she was worried about losing him, didn't she? She said a number of times he was so important, she was worried about losing him. I think one of the things, and we're going to wrap it up, but one of the things I have to say is that some of the behaviours that she described him doing, and obviously it's just her side of it, so we have to put that disclaimer out there. There's always
true.
two sides to every story.
I would like to hear his side.
I would like to hear his too, but he probably has his own side. But some of the behaviours she was describing, I would say, are gaslighting. So he's there cheating, she's feeling insecure, and he's like, what are you insecure for? What are you feeling like that? Don't you trust me? No, and I've got reason not to trust you. But so those are all those types of toxic behaviors that you've got to be aware of in relationships. And throughout this podcast, we will be talking about relationships and toxic behaviors and things to look out for, and what we put up with and what we won't. So
we put up with too much.
Absolutely, sometimes because we just want to be Mrs., don't we? Want to move from Mr. Miss,
too much.
Mrs.
Don't even have the ring and we're dealing with a whole bag of nonsense.
Absolutely. Okay then, so yes, but definitely check out that podcast, Dear Future Wifey, with Derrick Jaxn. I think it's actually called I'm Sorry Miss Jackson.
Yes.
So
sorry, not sorry.
Take a listen if you get a chance, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So please comment and let us know what you thought of it if you got a chance to listen to it. So moving on, The Guardian has a really interesting article that talks about the most recent census. I think we got the results from the 2021 census in the UK, which said that Christianity was on the decline. And I know that there were a lot of groups, such as non-faith-based groups and some atheist groups, that were encouraging people to actually mark down on the census that they were of no faith if they didn't have a faith, or if they didn't go to church, because they were hoping that it would be more reflective of the society as a whole. Because I think a few years ago, a lot of people would just mark Christian even if they didn't go to church or they weren't active Christians.
It was just who you believe in.
It's just Christian. But there was a real drive this census to mark down, actually, if you don't go to church, if you don't believe in God or what have you, or if you're not a Christian, mark down no faith. So I think that's obviously had a part of this census, which has said that the Christianity is on the decline. But in African and Caribbean denominations, it's actually the opposite, and it's actually on the rise. So what do you think? Why do you think that might be?
I think growing up Caribbean, listen, when you were younger, you didn't have a choice.
That's right.
Okay? You're going to church.
That's right.
However, by the time some people, what I noticed having grown up in church, by the time some people got to 17, 18, you didn't see them again.
Yeah, gone.
It's like, okay, I'm old enough now, I've finished high school, I can choose, and
make
I choose
my own
not
decision.
to come.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do see them come back.
Absolutely.
So it's like, I think after going out into the world, then you have this realization, hey, there is something to be said about this God that my mom or my dad or my nan has spoken about, and I want to get to know him for myself. So I think for us, there's a lot of people who said, I didn't understand it then, but now I get it now, and I'm glad that my mom brought me up in church, or I went to church with my nan, or whoever it was. So for some other ethnic groups, cultures, it's you have a choice. Do you want to go to church today? And the child would say no, and then that's fine. But in the Caribbean household, in the black household, you ain't got a choice. No, you are going. And even if your parents not going, you're going.
You're going on the church bus, you're going with your nan, you're going with the neighbour down the street who's going. You're going. And that's very true. And I love it. There's a scripture that says, train up a child in the way that they should go. Because when they're old, they won't depart. And as you said, even if they get to a stage where they go out and they experience the things of the world, a lot of times the foundation is there, the memories are there, and they find their ways back into faith. Do you think it happens more for women than men?
I think so. I find that there are a lot, when you look into the churches, and all over, because I like to watch services online, and I'm looking at the American churches, I'm looking at the Caribbean churches here in Europe, and it's like, where are the men?
Oh, girl.
You know, so I'm wondering if it dates back in the day with war, with slavery, that kind of stuff. So you're seeing the women and the children, and they're here and they're praying and they're holding the family up, but you're not seeing the men. And when you do find the men, they're already married. Or it's the grandfather in the church. Yeah. So it's like, where are the men? Don't they hold faith to that esteem, or are they too busy working? What is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know some people out there might say that the church is too feminine. I've heard that a few times, and that's why the men don't like
the songs we choose.
Yes, so that's why the men, and having to hold hands, and that's another conversation for another time, because we'll definitely have to come to that. But I completely agree. And you even said, you know, you go to church with your nan or what have you. You hear of the matriarchs of the family being the ones that take the grandchildren or the children and stuff. You don't so much hear about the fathers, the grandfathers, the patriarchs of the family taking the children in. But I do definitely agree that it is that kind of generational thing where we take our children, or we send our children to church, even if we're not going ourselves, because we want them to have
that faith,
that foundation. So definitely. I think it goes to show, though, that we need to be evangelizing more. I think we need to be spreading the word more. And I think I can only speak for myself. I find it easier to speak to a person of colour about God than I would necessarily to speak to a person who isn't of colour about God. So I know that when I'm maybe witnessing or speaking to people or evangelising, I would more bring a person that looks like me to my church, which is a black majority church, than maybe a non-black person to my church, where they might feel a little bit awkward.
I guess. It's interesting because a couple of weeks ago I was invited by a lady from my son's school. So both of us, our sons, are in the same class. And she said, you know, she was drawn to me, and she was like, something's different about her. She couldn't figure it out until she's like, oh, she's a Christian. Something I must have posted or said, I don't know. She picked it up then. So she invited me to her church. Now, first of all, girl, child, we were overdressed, okay? But listen, that's okay, because I had to go to church that Sunday, and I said to her, when I was finished, I'll come. And you know, they were very welcoming. And my daughter and I, as we sat there, we were comparing, but not in a bad way to say, I don't like this or I don't like that. It was like, I like how they do this, you know. And my daughter was like, Mom, it's so simple here. You know, it's so relaxed. And basically they had their service, and then they were having a picnic outside, which was something I keep saying, I want to see our church come outside of the walls. You know, people had their blankets down. My son planted how many different pots of stuff. You know, they had arts and craft, they had desserts, sandwiches. It was just a beautiful atmosphere. And I didn't see color. I didn't see race. I know some people like, okay, whatever, but you know, they didn't make us feel like we weren't welcome.
You were different,
They if it was anything, they tried to make us feel even more welcome. Then would you come back, and how did you hear about us, and that sort of thing. And she said the same thing that I was feeling, that we need, you know, to just embrace each other more. Absolutely. Forget about the race and whatever, and come together more as a church. Because at the end of the day, it's not about color. It's about the God that we serve. So it was beautiful. And I did say, you know, if they're having anything else, I would go, because at the end of the day, we're all serving the same God. So
no, definitely. I do think there are differences between our churches
and how we pray
and how we pray and how we praise and how we express ourselves.
But even in their ethnic group, there is a difference, because she spoke about how their church came together, because I think it was 2 or 3 different churches that they had to merge. And so you had some who were accustomed to worshiping in, you know, probably the old time way, the hymns and the the
yes.
quiet way or whatever, and then you had like the new age type of thing, you know, more loud music, whatever. So it was like a merger for them as well.
Wow.
So, you know, they're going through the same thing that we're going through.
Absolutely. I think it's funny because when I was in Canada, I went to a church. I needed to go to church. And the church that I had been visiting was a Pentecostal church, and it was quite far from where I was staying. I wasn't driving at the time, and it was Sunday to get the bus and stuff. But there was a church just down the street from where I was staying, and I was like, right, I'm going to go to this church. I think it was an Episcopalian church or something like that. But I was like, right, I'm going to church today. Got myself ready, went to church. Entered the church, beautiful building, just, you know, those old-fashioned buildings, and I am the only one that looks like me, but that's okay because I'm going to church, and people were very welcoming. You know, they were fine. So we get in and we start, and then I started to notice the differences, and I think the most significant difference for me was we sang a hymn, and I think we had the little book, so we sang the hymn, and at the end of the hymn I was like, yes. And it was like the whole church turned around and looked at me. I was like, sorry. I put my hands down, but I had to try to like sit on my hands, because even after we read the prayer, I was like, amen, and they didn't speak out loud like that either. I think it was just the main lead that did it. But coming from a very expressive form of worship, it was very, very different, and it just made me chuckle. And it's one of those things that I look back on now, and I think it's important for us when we have visitors come to our churches to know that people worship differently in different places, and the loudness and the hallelujah and stuff may not be for everybody. Some people may feel quite uncomfortable with that. So
even in your own black culture, you know,
absolutely.
Because I remember when I was in the Caribbean and I invited a friend to church, and that Sunday, like the spirit hit this lady, and he was holding on to the bench, and I was like, what is wrong with him? Because I grew up with this, so this is
church, this is God moving. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, he was an Anglican, and he was legit scared.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my goodness, you know, I didn't even think about that. So
this is it. So, but I think it's really important, and I know this was frowned on a little bit back in the day, but not so much now, that we visit other people's churches.
Yeah, we should
go and we fellowship, and we take what we know to others, kids. And then they bring us, and you know, a picnic after church sounds great because I love to eat. Girl. So, you know, anywhere there's food, you will find me.
Amen.
Yes, and my waistline is telling that story right now. But yes, so I think it's important that we do things like that. So Christianity is apparently on the decline in most churches except for the African and Caribbean churches. So let us know what you think, and have we got it right? Have we got it wrong? You know, tell us what you think.
Isn't what the Bible talked about though, as we're closing that up?
Like
in the last days when Christianity would be the minority and in the majority. So is it the last day prophecies that we're seeing being fulfilled?
I suspect it is, and I think there's a lot of signs of the times coming up now, which will be another podcast in itself. And we can't pretend to be theologians or anything like that, but we can look at the times. Absolutely. So we'll talk about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay then, Tasha. The exciting one that we want to talk about.
Child, I don't want to talk about it.
Listen, we need to talk about it.
I was so annoyed.
So, for those of you who may or may have not seen, there is a video of a beautiful couple. They both look good. Yeah, she was married couple. She was rocking that dress, walking down the aisle. They're holding hands. She's greeting everybody, and everybody's smiling. She's smiling, and her groom, in his other hand, so not the hand that obviously he's holding hers, but in his other hand, he has his phone.
Disrespectful.
And he is just doing something on that phone. And you could tell she's embarrassed because she's just smiling and looking over. But, you know,
I think at one point she tried to say something to him, and he looked at her. And then he continued.
I think that was, and at the end of the video, they're standing on the steps. and I'm sure she's like making some sort of, and just the attitude that came from him.
Yeah, it
was
rubbed
so
me the
uncomfortable.
wrong way. I'm like, this is not a good start. It's
So
not a good start.
uncomfortable. And obviously the comments were going crazy, and I'm sure you guys are like me. You go to the comments with your popcorn.
I didn't even.
But
I was so annoyed. I just sucked my teeth and scrolled past because I was like, the devil is a liar.
I was like, who you be texting though? Who you be texting? My friend said, actually what had just happened was that he'd taken a beautiful picture of them both and he had to post it to Instagram at that moment.
Honestly.
Well, do you know what? You can tell you're definitely
but how
positive.
do you have, you've hired a photographer for that purpose.
Absolutely. And my other friend said, why have you guys even got your phone?
Why
you even
on
got your
that
phone?
special day, like,
Just like
honestly.
that. If there was anyone that needs to get in touch with you, surely there's somebody else that they could send a message to.
Why are you trying to get in touch with me on my wedding day though?
Absolutely. Well, the question is who was getting in touch with him, because they were saying, he's texting his side piece going, just at a family function. Be
Stop
there soon. See you later tonight, or
No
just at a family wedding, can't talk too much, I'm in the
Really?
bridal party. See you tonight.
Nah, man.
Honestly.
I found it was disrespectful. And there's this thing that we do now. Like sometimes when I go out, I would look around and you clock everybody's at the table or whatever, and everybody's head is in the phone.
True.
So why did we come out if we're not here to socialize? Why are we here on the phone? Whatever happened to being present in the moment? And I find sometimes I'm hard on my daughter for it as well, because I'm like, there's got to be a time when you unplug.
Yeah.
And I said, this society has become so much into screens. Like you're sitting here and you're like, oh my goodness, you're taking 600 selfies, photos, whatever, and you miss the moment. And once it's gone, it's gone. That was your special day. You hired a photographer for that reason. So I am sorry, I'm going to have to miss that selfie opportunity coming down the aisle. But I'm trusting that moment to my photographer. I'm supposed to be locked in at this point. I found it was disrespectful. I would have given him back his ring and walked away.
There you
Annulment.
go. Listen, I 100% agree. And it's so interesting what you say about going out and just seeing everybody's heads down. I do it as well. And I look around and I just think everywhere.
It's so sad.
The train, the bus,
nobody's talking to anybody.
Everybody just head down in. And I'll be honest, I'm conscious of it, but I do it, and I'm trying to be better at it. And I, with my daughter, hate her being on her phone. So I'll be like, get off your phone, but then I'm still there on mine, and I'm like, the hypocrisy. So I am trying.
Not mommy being a hypocrite.
Absolutely, because I know, and she's not even a teenager yet, so I know that this is just setting it off. Exactly. And I'm saying to myself, I need to set a better example for her, because I want to be able to say to her, come off your phone, and she can't come back with, but you're on yours, or you're always on yours. So I know 100% that we need to do better, but it's society as we are, even when there's traumatic things happening.
That's the one that irks me.
Yeah.
Though. But there's a time and a place. I'm like, you see somebody hurting on the street, and instead you try and be that good Samaritan. You're there doing a Facebook Live or something, doing a video, sending it to your different groups. Like, how have we become that people?
Yeah.
And why is it acceptable?
Yeah. It's just this age of voyeurism, and it's just, and we know
but there's a time, as they used to say to us when we were younger, there is a time and a place. The Bible talks about it. There's a time and a season for everything. Yeah. You would have had so many other opportunities to have your time to post a picture on your wedding day.
Yeah, I don't think it was a picture of them both. I think she was just being a little bit pedantic.
But
I think he was texting. He was scrolling. Yeah, he was actively doing something.
So if you can't take time for me in what's supposed to be one of the biggest or most special moments of our lives, what's going to happen?
Absolutely.
In other moments?
But I think what's made it worse, or what will make it worse, is it's gone viral. So it's not going to be anything it's not going to be anything that she can
live down anytime
soon, because it's
there.
there. It's
supposed to be a special day. Absolutely. I won't be surprised I'm not trying to put
No,
anything
speak
on their
now.
marriage or anything like that. But I won't be surprised if I hear that she walked away.
Yeah.
Because I've watched something before when the groom disrespected the lady, and she went through with the ceremony, everything and whatever. And after he was looking for her after the reception, she was like, "You disrespected me one too many times, and I'm leaving." She went through the whole thing.
But
She left him at the end of the wedding day.
But isn't this like what we said about Danae?
Crazy.
There would have been times during the courtship, where
Red
he would have
flag.
displayed those types of behaviors.
Yep.
And you know, there is so much more. It's more important than just getting a ring. Your respect of yourself and your respect of your feelings and how it's more than just, I want to be married, I want to be a missus.
It's more than that.
It has to be more. It has to be, because otherwise that's going to be your life. He's going to disrespect you. You're giving him permission to treat you like that, and he will disrespect you like that forever, and you will be stuck in it. And then
100%.
until 10 years later, you're like having to get out and deal with all that trauma. You know, so
when she had cut it off at 19.
Listen, you know.
But I think that's the thing we need to start teaching our girls.
Definitely.
And for even us as older women to remember, you know what? I said to myself, it is better to be single and happy than to be married and miserable. Or in a relationship and miserable.
Absolutely.
I think my friend said it. It's better to marry
don't
something married long than to marry wrong. It's something, but I'll remember it for the next time. Better to wait long than to marry wrong or something like that. But we need to start more thinking about ourselves, our self-worth, how God sees us, our identity, etc., and putting more weight on that than a ceremony that lasts for 5 minutes and a ring.
So one of the things, you know, we're not we are single women, so we understand the stresses and the desires and the frustrations of being single, and I think we need to speak about that. And how do you keep it clean, and how do you save yourself whilst you're waiting? We will talk about it because we understand, but we're also saying we've got to have more self-respect and self-worth than just settling for the first man that come along and just treat us so bad. So, but I think we've got to round it up there. But thank you so much for joining us today. We've had a great time. We hope you have too. So please tune in next time for Faith, Grit and Grace, the place where we say what we know you're thinking. All right, God bless.